Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and this is the One Mix 1S Yoga, which is a tiny little laptop with a QWERTY keyboard, a 7-inch touchscreen display, and it's an update to a model that came out in 2018 called the One Mix Yoga. And there's a couple of key upgrades on the new model. It, first of all, has a fingerprint sensor down here. Second of all, it has a faster processor. And third, it has faster storage. So this particular model, it sells for about $440, although you can find a coupon to save about $10 in the description of this video or at liliputing.com. And it's got a 1920 by 1200 pixel display, an Intel Celeron 3965Y dual-core processor, 8 gigs of RAM, and 128 gigs of solid-state storage. That's up from an Intel Atom processor in the predecessor and from eMMC slower storage in the predecessor. So overall, it's a nice upgrade, but it's still one of the most affordable little laptops with a 7-inch screen from One Netbook or any other company. So it actually has a design that looks pretty similar to the One Mix 2 Yoga, which came out later in 2018. It has that fingerprint sensor that I mentioned. It does not have a backlit keyboard, which is, the original One Mix did, but in exchange for losing the backlit keyboard, you get that fingerprint sensor, faster processor, and faster storage. So overall, it's a pretty nifty device that you can use as a tablet or as a notebook. It supports optional pen input. The pen tends to cost about an extra $20. It's not a Surface Pen. It's from a company called Goodix, but it does support pressure sensitivity. So you can sort of draw different types of lines. I can't really draw very much at all, but you can see that it works. It supports palm rejection and so forth. So overall, it does pretty much what it's supposed to do. And it's not a bad upgrade if you're looking for a relatively affordable device. It's not the most powerful, and the Celeron 3965Y processor is sort of a mixed bag when it comes to performance. You can find some benchmarks at liliputing.com. There's a Celeron N4100 chip, which is an Intel Gemini Lake processor. It's lower power, but it has a quad-core CPU as opposed to a dual-core CPU. And some devices with an N4100 are actually going to outperform this in terms of CPU benchmarks. In terms of graphics, you definitely get better graphics from this particular processor. So it's sort of a little bit of a mixed bag. It's not as powerful as some other devices we've seen recently, like the One Mix 3, which I also happen to have here. The One Mix 3 is a larger device with a more powerful processor, definitely runs circles around this little guy, but it costs more. So the One Mix 3 sells for about $760 and up, and it has an Intel Core M3 Amber Lake processor. I really enjoy using the One Mix 3. It has a larger keyboard, a larger screen, a faster processor. There's a lot of things that I really like about it. But it is a little bit bigger, and it is substantially more expensive. So I'm going to take a quick look at these two devices side by side in this video. And the first thing I really want to focus on is the size, I suppose. So as I mentioned, 7-inch display, 1920 by 1200 versus an 8.4-inch 2560 by 1600 pixel display. So you get more screen space and a larger keyboard, which is really nice on this particular model. But it's also a bigger device. It's going to be a little bit harder to, say, fold in half and slide into your pocket. This is a little bit large for a pocket-sized device, but it is something that you can conceivably do that with. You can theoretically put this into a pocket, but it's going to have to be a much larger pocket, I would say. In terms of ports and sort of what you get with the two of them, the design is pretty similar, as you can see. They're both about the same thickness. They both have the same ports, but on the larger model, they're actually on both sides. So we've got micro HDMI and audio jacks here, whereas they're on micro HDMI and audio on this side. USB, USB, USB Type-C, USB Type-C, micro SD card slots. The bottom of both of them have these little rubber feet. We've got ventilation, more of it on the larger model, and we've got these 360-degree hinges. So the design of the two devices is actually pretty similar, but this weighs about 1.5 pounds versus about 1.1 pounds. So in terms of portability, this wins. In terms of usability, I'd say that this model with the 8.4-inch screen is much more usable. And not only is that because you get the larger screen, but I would say that the larger keyboard makes a huge difference as well. So let's take a closer look at that keyboard comparison. So first thing that you'll notice is if you stack them up sort of like this keyboard extends down further, it's backlit, and it also extends further from side to side. So we've got larger keys. Even though they're both 6-row keyboards, in this case we've got full-size keys for the number keys, whereas we don't have that on the smaller model. The biggest difference to me, I think, is that the punctuation keys, like the comma, the period, the question mark, are a little bit larger and they're better spaced. So when I type, I have a hard time making these out just by touch. There are a couple of other placements that have been changed around. So the tab key is above the Q here, whereas it's above the 2 here. We've got a 1 above the Q. And the delete and backspace keys are delete, back, back, delete. I'm not entirely sure why, but that's the decision that the company went with in changes here. Also, you might notice that the fingerprint sensor is up here in the right corner next to the power button instead of down here. And there's a full, well, not necessarily full, it's not as big as a regular spacebar, but it's not broken the way it is on this model. I find that sometimes reaching down with my thumb is a little bit confusing, that there's a optical touch sensor here. The reason for the optical touch sensor breaking up the keyboard here or below it here is that there's just not enough room for a full-size touchpad on either of these. So again, I think in terms of performance, you're definitely going to get better performance, which is unsurprising, out of the larger model. It's got a significantly faster processor. The version I'm testing has a Core M3 8100Y processor. It's available with up to a Core i7 processor, Core i7 8500Y, up to 16 gigs of RAM and up to 512 gigs of storage. The version I'm testing is the entry-level version. It sells for about $760 as opposed to a starting price of about $440. So smaller, cheaper, larger, more powerful, sort of, figure out what it is that you're looking for. And as I mentioned, this version does support this Goodix pen. That does not work on the larger model, so it's not interchangeable. The larger model supports a Surface style pen, which does not work on the smaller model. So that's just something else to be aware of. The accessories are not necessarily interchangeable, although the power supplies are. They both come with 30-watt USB Type-C power adapters. I'm going to do a quick keyboard test momentarily, but before I do that, I'm going to do one other test, just to sort of, this is hardly a performance test, and if you want to have a detailed performance test, I would recommend going to Liliputing.com to take a look at some of the benchmarks that I've done. But I just want to show you loading GIMP, which is a program that generally takes a pretty long time to load on most computers. So I'm just going to go ahead and see how long it takes for that to load up, and then I'm going to do a little keyboard test and just show you a little bit of typing. Now, it's not going to be definitive because every time you type it's going to be a little bit different, but generally speaking, I find I can type faster on this one than this one. All right, so that was actually a little bit surprising. I thought it was going to take longer for GIMP to load on the slower model. It did not, and I think that might have to do with the fact that they both have reasonably fast solid-state storage. So even though we've got a slower processor on the smaller model, the SSD makes a difference. So let's do some typing tests. Let's open up typingtest.com. Let's close this ad once the little close button comes up. And let's bring this a little closer. Another thing that I keep meaning to point out is we've got status indicators here above the keyboard. So we can see that the caps lock indicator, the fan indicator, and the power indicator are all up here, whereas here there's just a single button that tells you if it's powered on or not. So I do prefer the location here where it's a little bit easier to see what's happening. All right, so I'm going to do a little typing here, starting with the One Mix 3 Yoga with the 8.4-inch screen and the larger keyboard. Panthera tigris, one of the world's... Oops, that did not come out right. Magnificent and revered animals faces possible extinction in the wild. Since the turn of the century, its habitat and numbers have been reduced by 95%. For a million years, the king of the jungle lorded over a territory stretching from eastern Turkey to the Russian Far East. Its forest. All right, so 68 words a minute, 4 mistyped words. I've sometimes been able to get as high as 85 words a minute, but that's not too bad a score. Given that I took the time I probably shouldn't have taken to go back and correct an error. Let's do the same test here, and I should have a slight advantage because I am familiar with the words, but this smaller keyboard is going to be a little tricky. The tiger, Panthera tigris, one of the world's most magnificent and revered animals, faces possible extinction in the wild. Since the turn of the century, habitat and numbers have been reduced by 95% for a million. Why does it think king of the jungle? For some reason it thinks I'm typing everything wrong. I'm just going to do this over again. Make it something funny happened here. Tiger, Panthera tigris, one of the world's most magnificent and revered animals, faces possible extinction in the wild. Since the turn of the century, its habitat and numbers have been reduced by 95% for a million years. The king of the jungle lorded over a territory stretching from eastern Turkey to the Russian Far East. Its forest home extending northward to Siberia and southward into Bali. All right, well, so today's tests are full of surprises. Not only did GIMP open just as quickly on the two computers, but I actually went up with a better typing score on the smaller keyboard. I will say my hands felt a little bit more cramped, and the last time I did this test, I did a different test where I had to hit the capital A more frequently, and I do find that's really hard to do, hitting Shift and A at the same time. Maybe I could train myself to remember that there's a Shift key on the right side and do that instead. So there are some things that take some getting used to. You also might notice that I slowed down when I had to hit the punctuation keys. It takes a while to remember where the apostrophe and quotation marks are, and these little ones, the comma, the period, and the question mark, are so close to each other that even though I tend to be a touch typist, I usually have to look at the keyboard before I press one of them. But that said, 80 words a minute. Now, that's for typing for exactly 1 minute. If I were doing this a little bit longer, I think my hands would start to get tired. And if memory serves, I think I tried to do that for a while last time I reviewed one of these 7-inch models, and my hands did sort of get tired from being so close together all the time. So generally speaking, I find it more comfortable typing on the larger keyboard. I prefer the backlit keys, although I do prefer the black with white letter key layout here on the smaller model. So overall, the two devices function pretty similarly. They're both really small by traditional laptop standards. So for comparison's sake, I've got here a 14-inch Acer laptop, and the two of them together are just a little bit wider than it. And this is what it looks like when you stack the three of them on top of one another. So it gives you a sense of just how much difference there is. Now, this is a really small Acer laptop with very slim bezels. It weighs just about 2 pounds. This is the Acer Swift 7. But you can see a 14-inch, 8.4-inch, or 7-inch. There's a pretty big difference in terms of size. And so that's really sort of the key advantage to these little ones, is that you can take them places you might not normally take a laptop. That is also true with the Acer Swift 7, which I'll have a review of soon, because even though it's got a 14-inch screen, it is incredibly thin and light, measuring less than 0.4 inches thick and weighing less than 2 pounds. But that's 1.5 pounds, 1.1 pound, and really coming pretty close to being pocket-sized. So I'll have more information on the OneMix 1S Yoga coming soon, but you can check out the links for this video for purchase links and more information, and links to liliputing.com, where you can find out more about this little device, which is the latest, or one of the latest, from One Netbook. And now that I put them side by side, I think it might actually be slightly taller than the OneMix 3 Yoga. But again, it's substantially less expensive, with a starting price of around $440, where you can save $10 using the coupon in the description of this video. This is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and a look at the OneMix 1S Yoga first look, and a comparison with a couple of other devices, including the OneMix 3 Yoga